we are going to go even deeper into the psyche, into places that some people wouldn't dare go, but not you, because you are here for the real work. We love it. We are going beneath the surface. We are exploring not just what is hidden, but why it got there in the first place. Hello, and welcome to a brand new season of Horoscope Weekly, an OpenMind original. I'm your host, Aliza Kelly, and I'm so happy you're here. And I'm so happy I'm here. I am so excited for all of the amazing conversations that we're going to have in this new season of the show. Every Wednesday, we are serving up AstroloTea. This is where I unpack different parts of astrology that shape your life, from sex and shadow work to your love language and sacred spiritual healing, or today's episode, which is 5 ways to explore shadow work astrologically, which I cannot wait to get into with you. And don't forget to tune in every single Monday for your weekly download, where I decode the most pivotal astrological events, from retrogrades to eclipses, and explore the theme of the week, like what balance really means in your life, including personalized horoscopes for every single zodiac sign. So you'll always know what's up. Okay, it is almost time for AstroloTea. Let's dive into it right after this quick break. Hello, friends. Welcome to today's episode of AstroloTea. I'm Aliza Kelly, your host and spiritual friend. And as we step into the shadow of autumn equinox, moving into our shorter days on the other side of this powerful seasonal threshold, we are also beginning our own Persephone journey. So let us talk about shadow work and how we can use astrology, aka your astrology, aka your birth chart, to better get to know and integrate your shadow self. Shadow work is the conscious act of facing your unconscious, of naming the parts of yourself that have been hiding, the shame, the rage, the fear, the guilt, the pain, the projections. Shadow work is the consideration that you have had to become someone in order to survive, and therefore parts of you have been buried just inevitably in this process. The term shadow in this context comes from Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology. He was a Leo sun, an Aquarius rising, and a Taurus moon, if you even care, which obviously I know you do. And he's the reason that we have words like introvert and archetype and collective unconscious. Jung wasn't just a psychologist. He was a mythologist. He was a mystic. He was a philosopher, and he was an astrologer. He saw the psyche not as a machine to be optimized, but as a mystery to be understood. And for him, astrology was one of the most symbolic tools for navigating that mystery. In fact, Jung once wrote, quote, "We are born at a given moment in a given place, and like vintage years of a wine, we have the qualities of the year and the season of which we were born," which is a beautiful exploration of understanding astrology and something I love to talk about with my clients. Astrology and your birth chart is a snapshot of the sky at the moment that you arrived. It is a snapshot of that energy of time. And that means that all of the things embedded in that time, whatever was going on in the collective, exist within you. And this is why certain people born at these critical points in history have that energy and essence wrapped up in who they are. I think about this a lot with people born in the early 80s during the AIDS crisis, right? How those power dynamics show up in their charts, or people born in 1989 at the fall of the Berlin Wall have that rebellion in them. I think about what this is going to look like in babies born during 2020, in that pivotal year in history. Whatever was going on socially, politically, geopolitically, collectively in the sky is something that exists within you. Now, keep in mind, no pun intended, that it was Sigmund Freud who created the structure around id and ego and superego. So those are Freudian terms. Jung developed a different system. And even though there's some overlap in the language, we're going to talk about ego a little bit. Jungian ego is different than Freudian ego. And if you're wondering, because why wouldn't you? Freud was a Taurus sun, Gemini moon, and obviously a Scorpio rising. He loved sex. But Jung, this proto-psychoanalytical Aquarius rising, believed the human psyche had three major components: consciousness, personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. The conscious mind is where we live most of the time. It's your awareness, it's your identity, it's your ego, it's the part of you that says, I'm like this and I'm not like that. But your conscious mind is only one small piece of your personality. It's a tiny sliver of what's actually running the show. Beneath that is the personal unconscious, which is a reservoir of memories and instincts and experiences you've forgotten or denied or repressed. These are the parts of your psyche shaped by your very unique life story. What you've lived, what you've endured, what you had to push away in order to belong. And then even deeper still is the collective unconscious. This is the realm of inherited psychological patterns shared by all humans. Think of it like an ancient operating system coded into your soul. It's where the archetypes live. It's the universal images and characters that show up in your dreams, in our collective mythology, in movies, and obviously in astrology. Astrology is obviously built around archetypes. There's archetypes in the planets. Venus is the lover, Saturn is the teacher. There's archetypes in the zodiac. Pisces is the dreamer, Aries is the warrior. There's archetypes in the houses. The second house is the house of values. The third house is the house of communication, and so on and so forth. So you don't just have a birth chart. You are, according to this psychoanalytical, mythological premise that we're working with here, you are a living myth. You are mythology unfolding in real time. And that brings us to one of the core pieces of Jungian work, which is called individuation. The goal is not to become perfect, it's to become whole, to integrate all of the parts of yourself, conscious and unconscious, light and dark, into one unified self. And that's self with a capital S self. That is self like soul. Jung's map of the psyche includes four major archetypes that shape this journey: the persona, the shadow, the anima / animus, and the self. Okay, so let's start with the persona. This is your mask. Maybe this is where we get that rising sign mask you wear in public a little conflated. But what Jung is talking about with this mask, this persona, is your social identity. It is your curated self. It's shaped by what you've been rewarded for, praised for, or told was acceptable. And this is really necessary. You need a persona in order to function in society, period. But if you over-identify with it, you forget who you actually are. Now, everything that you push out of the persona gets repressed into the shadow, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It's important to keep in mind that the shadow isn't just your trauma, though trauma does live in the shadow. It's also your jealousy, it's your control issues, it's your self-loathing, it's your manipulation, it's your desires, it's your lusty things, it's your rage. It's really anything that you deem too shameful to embed into your persona. It's too dangerous, it's too vulnerable, it's too much being seen. So it is banished into the shadow. But banishment doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And banishment also doesn't mean that that can't be an intentional strategic movement, which we're going to talk about momentarily, because your shadow never dies. It's always there. And it shows up in your projections, in the things that you can't stand in other people, but you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. Obviously, we talk about that for those zodiac signs that torture us, and we're unaware of the fact that we actually have all the zodiac signs within us, right? There's a lot of shadow self in the things that we don't like externally. The shadow, if it's totally unchecked, can be a real saboteur. It can damage your relationships and your self-worth, your success, but it's not necessarily self-destructive. It also includes our hidden potential, which is one of the reasons it's so important to integrate the shadow and to understand how to incorporate shadow work into your astrological practice. Then there's also the Anima and the Animus. These are contrasexual aspects of the psyche. You got to have some repressed sexuality involved in this early psychoanalytical stuff. When Jung created the system, the anima represented the unconscious feminine within a man, while the animus represented the unconscious masculine within a woman. And the anima and the animus represent these emotional, intelligent, creative vision, assertive receptivity, spiritual unions, this sort of yin and yang energy that exists within all of us when it is integrated. When it's denied, it's the compulsive fantasies, projections. It kind of gets into that Freudian stuff. It's the bad toxic cycles romantically or within power dynamics. And then the last thing I want to mention is the self, because the self is really at the center of all of it. And the self is not your ego, it's your essence. Now, Jung pulled a lot from Eastern philosophy in these early psychoanalytical systems he was creating. So this concept of self quite literally reflects this yogic Hindu philosophy of Atman, or the true self, or you could also call it soul. The self is the totality of your psyche. It's the center point that everything revolves around. So solar in a sense, right? S-O-L, solar, if you want to be punny. And how do we get to the self? How do we get to that core piece of who we are is through individuation. And that includes shadow work. And that also includes astrology. Because when you think about it, Jung's model mirrors what mythologist Joseph Campbell, another hero legend, later called the hero's journey, which is the call to adventure, the descent into darkness, the confrontation of the monster facing your demons, and then the return home where you are forever changed. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with the hero's journey. I'm obsessed with it. It's a wheel. It's a 360-degree wheel. Do you know what else is a 360-degree wheel? It's your birth chart. Your birth chart is also a 360-degree wheel where there are these different pivot points on it. The first house, the fourth house, the seventh house, the 10th house, the angular houses, which are really where the action happens. That's the story of where your life unfolds. And then it also, within that, we have a 12th house, which is your unconscious. We have an 8th house, which is where you need to be reborn. And then we have our archetypes playing within this wheel. We have Pluto and Saturn and Chiron. We have the moon. We have all of these celestial bodies that are marking initiations that demand you confront the full entirety of the chart of who you are so that you can individuate and reclaim yourself. I'm so obsessed with it. And I'm so excited to share this with you because to me, this is why astrology is not just, is it real? Astrology is about understanding who you really are so that you can ultimately come back home to yourself. It gives shape to understanding yourself. It gives language, it gives structure, it creates a map, a system to understand your own psyche. It organizes the complexities of your identity because you can't really get into what you don't look at. You can't integrate what you are refusing to acknowledge. But when you really take it all in and you look at your chart and you look at astrology as a reflection, you realize that there is nothing too shameful to have an archetype, right? Everything has an archetype, everything exists within you. So there's really no part of you that is too broken to be discussed. There's no part of you that's too damaged or too dark or too weird to be called out and brought in, right? To be integrated into the conversations of how astrology is a tool for healing. And this isn't even just for a single person, because a big part of this also is recognizing that unacknowledged shadow material in the collective is the root of violence, wars, genocide, oppression. We project what we haven't integrated onto this concept of other. And whether that is other people or other countries or entire populations, we need to do this work. I think we can all agree that we need to do this work right now, because in this space, we're talking about micro and macro, as above, so below. Coming up next, I'm going to talk about the 5 ways to explore your shadow, your personal shadow, through your birth chart. We're going to meet some familiar archetypes, like Pluto, ever heard of him? And then we're also going to talk about some more nuanced symbols like Black Moon Lilith, which everyone has in their birth chart, including you. So yeah, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back, my friends, back to AstroloTea, where we are getting into a very complex brew. In this next segment, we are going to head into the mythic underworld of your birth chart because, as we talked about, shadow work isn't just about the past. It's not just about your feelings. It's actually about these ancient stories that live in your psyche and understanding your personal mythology. These stories are ones that you might be carrying without even realizing. They may have been passed down from generation to generation, etched in your birth chart like fingerprints. And you need to know what the DNA is, right? You're dusting for fingerprints now. This is the detective work that defines our entry into spooky season. So, a reminder that if you haven't already, make sure to grab your birth chart and look on with me. I recommend using Time Passages. It's my favorite app. You can calculate your birth chart for free. I am going to go placement by placement, and every single person has these 5 placements in their chart. So we are going to unpack them together. Let us start with perhaps the deepest one of them all, Pluto. Now, Pluto is still a planet in astrology. It's the furthest out in our solar system. And even though some astronomers have stripped its planetary status, for us astrologers, it is still incredibly important. And its value is in the symbolic and mythical system we have assigned to this celestial body. Because Pluto, as an archetype, is really associated with the myth of Persephone and Hades. And this is also obviously Tank. There are no coincidences, because this week is autumn equinox. And why we're talking about shadow work in the first place is because this week is our descent into the underworld. Okay, so Persephone, innocence incarnate. Persephone was Demeter's daughter. And Demeter, being the goddess of agriculture and harvest, obviously raised this very flower child baby. One day, Persephone, minding her own business, picking flowers in a field, never had to deal with pain, unaware of death, unaware of evil in the world, and suddenly the ground literally cracks open. And Hades, the god of the underworld, drags her down. And in that instant, everything changes. Her mother is a wreck. Earth starts to wither away. That's why we have winter. But over time, Persephone, who's now in the underworld, isn't just adapting to these new conditions. She's also evolving. she becomes queen of the underworld and she rules besides her abductor for half of the year. Demeter makes an agreement with Hades, which is that at every spring equinox, she comes back up, and then we have spring and we have summer. But at the autumn equinox, she has to go back down. Now, it makes me really emotional. This is a very complex myth, and we can look at it from lots of different points of view. Very, very heavy symbolism here. But I've actually personally been exploring this myth a lot in my own therapy and the therapy that I've been doing personally. As some of you may know, I have diagnosed CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's different than PTSD, which is a single incident. CPTSD is sort of having multiple activators, multiple sources that contribute to this. So for the past year, actually since my grandmother died last August, I've been doing EMDR, which has been incredibly intense. It's a targeted therapy for dealing with post-traumatic stress. But my wonderful therapist has discovered how much, for me, talking about archetypes and symbolism really, really allows my brain to think about some of these stories from a different point of view. And I would argue that everyone's brain benefits from thinking about symbolism because that's how humans are wired. So we have been talking about Persephone a lot because the abduction of Persephone really symbolizes a situation, multiple situations, or a single situation in which a person is abducted or involuntarily pulled into an unconscious world through trauma, through fears, through circumstances, repressed emotions. And Hades, as the god of the underworld, represents how these forces compel us to confront parts of ourselves that we would rather suppress and avoid. And it's in these instances that we are thrust out of innocence and into parts of our identity that we wouldn't have necessarily been exposed to otherwise. So in Jungian terms, this myth also speaks to that process of individuation, the journey of integrating the unconscious material into the conscious self. Persephone maintains her personhood, right? She is split into these two parts, but then she is reborn. The maiden becomes the witch, who becomes the queen, who becomes this bridge between the worlds within ourselves. And that is exactly what Pluto in your chart is doing. It is the story of your own life and death and rebirth cycle and how shadow work shows up in your identity. Pluto in the chart shows you where your psyche cracks open. It is not comfortable, but it is sacred and it is powerful. It reveals where your soul undergoes this repeated life and death and resurrection storyline. Pluto is a generational planet, so people within your generation all share the same Pluto placement. For me, this is Pluto in Scorpio people. For boomers, this is Pluto in Leo. So I'm a millennial, Pluto in Scorpio. Some millennials are also Pluto in Libra. Gen Z have Pluto in Sagittarius. And our Gen Alpha children and babies are Pluto in Capricorn. Yikes, we will cross that bridge when we get there. But this is why, even though it is also important to pay attention to the sign that it's in, if you want to tune into what it really means for you individually, you need to pay attention to the house that Pluto occupies in your birth chart. If you have Pluto in the first house, this can manifest as having a very strong presence that often has to deal with authority issues. You need to transform your identity in order to deal with this ego death archetype that keeps coming back over and over again and be like, actually, like, I'm the one in charge. This is my life. Alternatively, if you have Pluto in the fifth house, the shadow work here might be around shame and joy, right? Joy in shame. The belief that pleasure is dangerous or undeserved. But it also is the power to create from those pain points and to become integrated with pleasure and sensuality and creativity and understand how that defines your own artistic soul. Okay, next up, let's talk about Black Moon Lilith. Now, Black Moon Lilith isn't a planet. It's actually not even a physical object. It's a gravitational point. It's the lunar apogee, which is the furthest point in the moon's elliptical orbit from Earth. And that distance, that concept is important. The moon governs our instincts, our inner tides, our memory, and Lilith lives in the moon's outermost edge, symbolizing the part of us that exists beyond domestication, beyond control, actually even beyond reach. Now, this point is named for Lilith, which is the first woman archetype in both Jewish and Mesopotamian folklore. She predates Eve. Actually, Lilith was Adam's first equal, made from the same clay. But when Adam tried to dominate her, she said, "Nope, I'm not having it." And she left Eden on her own volition. She exiled herself. And then, obviously, because we are talking about a very strong and independent woman here, Lilith was later demonized. She was painted with talons and wings and serpents. She became this predator, demonic figure, devourer of children. But beneath that fear-mongering is something that is truly wild and primordial. Lilith, as an archetype, is the unbroken feminine. She doesn't assimilate. She doesn't obey. She stands her ground. And in Jungian depth psychology, Lilith corresponds to the repressed feminine shadow. She's the intuitive, she's the erotic, she's the untamed force that society teaches us to hide. She's very inconvenient to men. She remembers what power felt like before she was shamed. And every single chart has a Black Moon Lilith symbol in it. And wherever it shows up for you is where you have inherited your own exile. It's where you have learned, often through pain, that this part of you is too loud, too much, too wild to be welcome here. But when you start working with Black Moon Lilith, you don't just reclaim your power, you're reclaiming your truth, which means reclaiming yourself. The truth of your instincts and your rage and your desire. It's the part of you that will always refuse to pacify. So for example, if your Lilith is in Sagittarius, you may carry that exile of being too curious. You may have been punished for asking too many questions, for leaving your family's religion, for wandering too far away from the societal norms. Your appetite for truth may have been framed as problematic, but a Black Moon Lilith in Sag was born to wander for knowing, to explore wisdom, to ask hard questions, to challenge the status quo. Alternatively, if you have your Black Moon Lilith in Virgo, this reflects the wound of perfection. This is where you may have been accused of being too dirty, too messy, too disorganized, too real. And you may have been taught to earn your worth through purity or through service or through self-denial. So the work here becomes recognizing that the mess is holy and that you're allowed to be complicated, and that being this divine being that you are doesn't mean that you have to have everything linear and streamlined all the time. It lives in the sweat and the blood and the breath and being fully embodied and alive. So wherever Lilith lives in your chart marks a time of great refusal, your greatest potential for individuation. Black Moon Lilith invites you to rewrite stories that you were told about your own wildness. And now, finally, let's talk about the South Node, known in Vedic astrology as Ketu. And this is a body without a head. It's the decapitated tail of a dragon who once tried to steal the nectar of immortality. This is ancient, disembodied energy. It floats backwards through time, and it holds memories that your soul can't seem to shake. So in Jungian terms, the South Node is the compulsion of the past. It's the ego's fixation with what is known, with what is safe, which has already been integrated, and you don't actually really need to be dealing with it anymore. But to evolve, you must move towards the unknown, and that's the North Node. That's the dragon's head, and that's full of hunger and desire and future. So, for example, right now, the South Node is in Virgo in the sky, and that is clinging to order, to doing things right, to control. So if this is where your South Node is in your chart, but for all of us also, we are processing our internalized shame around chaos and emotion and even spirituality. But the bigger purpose is moving towards that North Node in Pisces, surrender, abstraction, divinity. You're not here to organize the universe. You're here to merge with it. Another example, if your South Node is in Leo, you've already performed. You've already led. You've already been admired. We get it. And there might be some lingering fear around irrelevance or invisibility, but the work here is to move to the North Node in Aquarius, to find meaning not in the spotlight, but in the community, in truth, in disruption. Last example, if you have the South Node in Libra, you have mastered diplomacy. You know how to bend, you know how to accommodate, you know how to make peace, but your soul is craving that North Node in Aries, the independence, the instinct, the raw power, not because you need to be alone, but because you need to be authentic. The South Node's lessons are not that the past is bad, it's that you just can't live there. Your shadow work with the South Node means recognizing where comfort has come from confinement and where you need to evolve in order to keep going. But there's still more to come. When we come back, we are going to look at the water houses in the birth chart and why they hold the keys to memory, to psychic inheritance, and of course, emotional release. Stick around, we will be right back. Welcome back, friends. Now we are going to go even deeper into the psyche, into places that some people wouldn't dare go, but not you, because you are here for the real work. We love it. We are going beneath the surface. We are exploring not just what is hidden, but why it got there in the first place. So now let's talk about the 4th house, the 8th house, and the 12th houses in your birth chart, aka the water houses. Now, if you have studied astrology with me or on your own for a while, you may know that it is very controversial for me to be referring to any houses as water houses because it's technically inaccurate. Astrology and the houses in your birth chart don't follow the zodiac system. They are not associated with the elements. The houses are a completely different system. So calling these 3 houses water houses sort of conflates the zodiac and the spatial system of the houses. But why am I doing this? For the sake of symbolism, for the sake of storytelling, for the sake of resonance and myth. We are going to explore the relationship between these 3 houses, the 4th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house, through their relationship to the psyche, because these are the subconscious areas of the birth chart. And in fact, from a Jungian perspective, that's kind of the point. Astrology is a symbolic language, and it should allow us to interpret things and to play and to explore with how it relates to our own understanding of self. Okay, so now let's open the door to the 4th house. This is the bottom of your chart, the IC, your true midnight. This is the area of your chart associated with home, not the one that you just have throw pillows in. This is your psychic home. This is the emotional undercurrent that was established before you could speak. It's where the legacy of your ancestors lives. It's what you have learned, what life looks like, and what abandonment feels like. And no matter how far you travel, that 4th house, the bottom of your chart, is always going to anchor you. It's always going to remind you that this is where you come from. Jung would call this the domain of personal unconscious. the inherited scripts, the childhood imprints, the familial myths that told you who you were allowed to be. And it's deeply personal, very sensitive. And when planets transit this space, or if you were born with transits here, you'll often find yourself reckoning with memory throughout your whole life. It's not nostalgia, it's a gateway. Memory becomes a spell. And remembering, when done with intention, becomes an act of liberation. Now, climbing up the chart, we're going to take this spiral staircase into the spooky, ooky, haunted Victorian dollhouse room, the 8th house, my favorite house, where I have so many planets. It's the chamber of transformation. It's death, rebirth, it's shared energy, it's secrets, it's sex, intimacy, money. The 8th house is where you merge with others and lose the illusion of control. It's not polite, it's not safe, it is certainly not kid-friendly, but it is powerful. And this house is where the shadow plays out in your relationships. It's where your projections live. It's where you may mistake trauma bonding for sexual chemistry. It's where you uncover the parts of yourself you tried to bury inside of something or someone else. And when we think about those sort of sexual energies, this is what we're talking about. The 8th house as a place for understanding self through sexuality, through the psyche. To work with the 8th house is to engage in alchemy. You have to let something die. A belief, a story, a defense mechanism. You have to grieve. And that is where we get to the real magic of this domain, is that this isn't just about destroying things. It's about transfiguration. And that is why I call the 8th house the house of alchemy, and why it is such a critical piece of shadow work. And finally, from the 8th, we drift over to the 12th house, the house without walls, the house without doors, the house without language. This is the ocean of the chart. This is the dream realm. This is the collective unconscious. This is the liminal mist. This is the place where everything that doesn't have a name gets stored. The 12th house is where all of the Jungian archetypes live: the mother, the martyr, the mystic, the addict, the divine. This is where you go when you are asleep, when you're meditating, when you lose track of time in a painting or in a prayer or in a breakdown. It is not a space in our chart that makes sense to the ego, and that's the point. The 12th house is ego death. It's where the self dissolves so that the soul can speak. So if you have planets in this area of the chart, if you are navigating a 12th house transit, you might feel like you are disappearing, like no one sees you, like you are underwater. And obviously that can feel really scary, but it's also so sacred, because this is the place of gestation, of intuitive knowing, of spiritual repair. In the 12th house, you're not broken. You're incubating. This is where you let yourself rest so that you can return. And now I want to share with you something that you can incorporate into your shadow work magic on a monthly basis. The lunar cycle gives us a perfect moment for this type of reflection, and it's the balsamic moon. This is the final phase in the lunar cycle before the new moon phase. It's the natural 12th house moment. During this balsamic dark moon phase, the sky is completely dark. There is no nocturnal illumination. It's the end of the cycle. The energy is quiet. The light is gone. And still, there's life. Something's happening beneath the surface. This phase, which lasts for about 3 days before the new moon, is when your body is probably going to feel more tender. Your dreams definitely get stranger, and your attention starts to turn inward. Don't fight it. This is a beautiful, very underutilized phase in the lunar cycle. This is the phase where our shadow really starts to rise, and we can let this wisdom, everything we just talked about, emerge on its own timeline. Shadow work is not a performance. It's not a trend. It's not something you master by following another person on TikTok. I'm sorry, T. Shadow work is a lifelong practice. It's a devotion. It's a dismantling. And if you're here, if you're listening, if you are getting all this astrology, then you are already doing it. You are already tuned in. So now, my friend, with all of this wisdom embedded in your chart, I invite you to feel, to tell the truth, to hold your own hand in that darkness, and to remember that the goal of shadow work is not to become better. You're never going to be better. It's to become whole. You are not here to banish your darkness. You are here to integrate it. You are here to find the beauty in your contradictions, to soften your shame and turn it into strength, and to remember always that even in the depths, you are never alone, because you are always with yourself, and you have always been with yourself, and you will always be with yourself, because you are yourself. And what a journey that was. That is all for this week. I'll be back on Monday with your celestial download, aka your horoscopes. And of course, next Wednesday, another piping hot cup of AstroloTea. Make sure you tune in every Monday and every Wednesday for all new episodes of Horoscope Weekly.